Hi, welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Steve Haberlin, and I'm here with my co-host.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Shiva Jahani, and I'm very happy and also very blessed and grateful for having Peter with us here. And thank you for so much for joining us and have you here in our show.
Yeah, so with Conscious AI and Human Flourishing, we changed the title a little bit, but we look at contemplative practice and how that helps us with just an artificial intelligence saturated world and how these practices might help us interact, relate, stay sane. Peter, I'm going to introduce you a little first, and then we'll talk more about your background. But Peter D. Hershag is an intercultural philosopher who makes use of Buddhist conceptual resources to address contemporary issues of global concern, with a focus on emerging technologies. As co-founder of the Buddhism and AI Initiative, he is an adjunct senior fellow and former director of the Humane AI Initiative at East West Center in Honolulu. A past, if I'm saying this right, Berggruen Institute China Center fellow and advisor to AI and Faith and the Union of Italian Buddhist Research Center. He's the author of more than 50 journal articles and book chapters, author and editor of more than 15 books. He's got two most recent books, Buddhism and Intelligent Technology Toward a More Humane Future, and Consciousness Mattering, a Buddhist Synthesis. I've been really, we were talking about before the podcast started, just really listening and learning from all the podcasts you're doing in the teaching, and I want to dive into the topics of these books. I'm super interested. But first, Peter, maybe a little bit more that you want to share about kind of your journey of how you got to this role. I mean, how do you get into Buddhism, and then how does that start to intersect with emerging technologies like AI? How does that even happen in someone's career?
It wasn't really a career choice, but it was kind of a developmental pathway where I started meditating in high school, and this is the early 1970s, so a psychedelic era mixed in with meditation.
Okay.
And was carrying that forward for about 5-6 years and had all kinds of truly mind-blowing experiences, and then decided that I would wake up the next morning and I'd be the same guy I went to bed as the night before. It's like all these wild experiences were not making me a better husband. They weren't making me a better father. They weren't making me a better friend. They were just really interesting things that were happening. And I came to the conclusion that I needed a daily practice, that I had to do something on a regular daily basis to be able to start to break down some of these habit formations. In Buddhism, the term is samskara, to break down these habit formations of thought and feeling and action, to be able to be the kind of person that I wanted to be present as. So that actually started in the early 70s, kind of decided on a practice tradition in 1980, but that coincided with me doing some work on AI. And that was with a group of people that eventually produced the first commercially viable expert system, TurboTax. So I was a knowledge engineer for the folks developing TurboTax at the same time that I was starting daily meditation practice. So it was kind of an interesting parallel between the two lives. Subsequently left and went to grad school. But in grad school, this will get us to the AI stuff more explicitly. In grad school, I went to Bali on a surf trip, do a little thing. And on Mount Agung, discovered that there were two kids selling water to tourists who knew everything there was to know about this American television show, MacGyver. And they thought I looked like MacGyver.
Okay.
And maybe at the time was a resemblance.
Yeah.
And I started asking them, how would they know? I mean, this is on the top of a volcanic mountain in the, Indonesian island chain. It's like 1991. How did this happen? And they said they had video cassettes coming into the village, and everybody sat around one TV in the village and watched. And I started thinking about what that was doing to them. I asked whether they knew anything about the Mahabharata, if they knew Arjuna and Krishna, these classic figures from the mythology of the Hindu tradition that was their native tradition. And they just didn't know anything. but they knew all about Dallas, and they knew all about MacGyver, and they knew all about these American TV characters. And I thought, I need to dig into this, and started thinking about how digital technology was, in fact, colonizing consciousness. And it was my first sort of insight into what was going on as internet was cranking up, and we were starting to get, the beginnings of the inklings that there could be this thing called web commerce, but seeing this as the beginning of the attention economy, the digitally mediated attention economy. So as my Buddhist practice was deepening, I'm getting more and more insight into the fact that there's this technological wave that was starting to form and that was going to be breaking in the relatively near future, that was really going to place at risk our most basic freedom. And that's the freedom to cultivate freedom of attention. Because if you don't have freedom of attention, you can't possibly have freedom of intention. And if you don't have freedom of intention, every other freedom is either an illusion or a joke. So my process has always been one of conserving those possibilities through contemplative practice is kind of like a prophylactic against what's going on with the digitally mediated lives that we lead.
So with the attention economy, with like you said, freedom of attention, where did you really see it? You followed this a long time, so you've been involved in kind of the intersection for a long time. Where did you see it really becoming, I don't know if you'd say like super intensified or problematic? Was it social media? Where did you really, was there a spike at a certain point or decade?
There were several. One was the onset of video games. So computer-generated video games, and especially first-person player games, and how that was transforming the lives of my son's friends and their attention span, what they were willing to do, and just the pace of responsivity that they were looking for. They were being indoctrinated into having a really high-intensity experience, and that regular day-to-day life, by comparison, was just simply boring. Mm-hmm. And with my son, he's growing up in a family where we never owned a television. So he's in a very, very different environment. And I could tell him, boredom is your responsibility. If you're bored, it's not your environment that's to blame. It's you who's to blame and what you're doing with your attention. And he tried to communicate that with his friends, just didn't get through. So that was the first inkling. And this is with my first son in the 80s and 90s. By the time the early 2000s with social media, my second son, it was really apparent with his friends. And what was clear at that level was it wasn't so much just about their ability to pay sustained attention moment to moment. It was also the kind of attention that goes along with making commitments. And this younger generation coming through wasn't so much commitment averse, meaning they understood commitment and were deciding not to be committed. It was they had no understanding that commitment was even part of a way of leading a life. It was just everything is the decision made at the last moment. Everything is changeable, revisable. Nothing needs to be carried through on. To me, that was a really shocking realization of how deep it was getting.
Wow. That's very interesting and fascinating because we are working with young adults and, you're very interested in knowing more about, your practice and what would you suggest for them with the, age of AI and also practice of like meditation and in any forms. So if you, you just dip more in that conversation, we would, appreciate that.
Well, I'll tell you a story, because it's one that I was really surprised by. It has to do with my younger son, who I taught to meditate when he was in high school. And he was able to sit on a cushion next to me for 15 minutes and not move a bit. That's really hard for a 15 or 16-year-old.
It's hard for anybody.
And I have no idea what was going on in his heart mind, but he could sit still for the full 15 minutes. But he had no interest in doing meditation on his own. His mother, who's Thai Chinese, wanted him, when he graduated university, to spend a short period ordaining as a monk. This is a typical thing in Thai families. boys will ordain as a monk for a period of a week to a month as a kind of coming of age event. To our surprise, he agreed. And to our surprise, he decided he would do not just a stint in an urban monastery where you keep your phone and basically live a normal life. You're just living in a monastery. He decided he wanted to do a forest monastic retreat in the Thai tradition. So Ajahn Chah style, shaved head, shaved eyebrows, going on alms round before dawn, 2 hours before dawn, every day, barefoot to the villages, sleeping on a wooden floor, no pillow, no blanket, hard labor, meditating for 6 hours a day. He shared his journal with us and went through all the typical stages that you go through with a retreat, especially a first very intense retreat. And when he came out 2 weeks later, it was immediately apparent that he had developed the capacity to see his own mind starting to respond to things and being able to not do what he would typically do. And he described it a year later to friends that were over for dinner. He said, all the meditation made me realize is that in every moment, there's space for me to not do the things I would normally do. And it showed up so immediately in his interactions with his mom, where things that would normally trigger off your little bickering mother-son engagements, the event would happen and you'd see just that millisecond pause. And then he would just move in a different direction. And I thought, that's what we're looking for, is that space in the present opening up where you realize the present moment is not a point. The present moment has temporal area. There's space in the moment.
So my question, Peter, so if someone is not does a young person, a college student or high school kid have to go to a retreat or have to shave their head and go there to get this ability? Or could you is there a practice? Is there a technique that, it's not going to require a lot of their attention or time that they could do daily or we could recommend?
There are a lot of people that are doing contemplative studies at colleges and universities. And I think that there's lots of research that says it needs to be a sustained practice over a period of time. Mm-hmm. And I think that what my son went through in a very intensive retreat environment was compressing 6 months of daily meditation into 2 weeks.
Okay.
It's like that type of thing. Does it have a long-term effect? To some degree, I think it does. But really, it's about daily practice. And so if I were to make a recommendation to students, I would say start with something that you can manage. Something really easy, like 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. But make it 5 minutes the same time every day and do it for a month and see what you think about yourself, how you're in your day-to-day life after a month. And if you can increase that to 7 minutes and 10 minutes and 15 minutes, well, then do that. And as to the technique, there's lots of different techniques. And I think it's appropriate for people to find a meditation teacher who's got a track record and who's locally available to you so that you can ask questions if things come up and have your teacher help guide you through that. And I think with most universities, there are very responsible systems in place for doing that. And I would highly recommend students do this.
They can just take your course, Shiva. They could take your
I teach
meditation and yoga courses, and there are like hundreds of students, so they would learn that in your course or different techniques in your course, right?
Oh, definitely.
I'm plugging her, but yeah, they would, in other universities too, right? Have similar classes or even maybe clubs or things, get groups that get together. But so, Peter, I want to run this research by you because I was saying to Shiva, I want to see what you think's happening here. So there was a study done in China with undergraduate media students, undergraduates, and there was about 600 or so. And they found a correlation. It seems that when the mindfulness increases, what they're calling AI anxiety, just having this negative kind of view of AI and it's stressing you out, AI anxiety. That's the term in the literature. It seems to go down. It seems, in other words, another way of looking at it for listeners would be increased mindfulness or mindfulness practice helps us maybe relate more positively or more with AI in a healthier way. So we didn't exactly duplicate. We did a similar study with students in her mindfulness and yoga classes and found significant correlation as well. We found also up and down, right? So it seems like it can help be what we're saying is a moderator. What do you think is what do you think is happening there? And especially like within the mindfulness and Buddhist context, is it that just like your son, are they just more aware of like how they're interacting with AI and what it's doing to them? Or I just wanted to see what you would think of.
I think there's a number of things going on, and part of it would depend on how long the students were involved in the mindfulness practices and all the rest of that. I mean, there are a lot of different factors at play.
Yeah.
But one of the things that mindfulness practice does, depending on how it's being taught, is certainly providing people with a set of resources for dealing with stress and anxiety. And so if the normal interactions with AI generated media or with chatbots has been inducing some kind of AI anxiety, then doing mindfulness practices will help you to deal with that anxiety. Does it change the basic relationship with the AI system, or is it changing stuff on the user side of the system? And I think that's a question that has to be answered separately, like looking and seeing whether or not the content of the engagements with AI is also shifting, and not just the student's ability to handle the difficulties and stress of AI. I think, though, that it's also the case that with young people that realize through just being able to perform basic practices to regain some sort of agency with respect to their own attention, and through that to have a sense that they're able to determine what matters to them. I mean, attention is a measure of salience. And once they become able to feel as if they now have the agency to decide what matters, then they know that their intentions in the world are freer than they otherwise would be. And that sense of having that space to do things differently, to form your own intentions about how you're going to act in the world, is liberating already.
Yeah.
So I think that the practice itself is useful, but whether or not that's something about the relationship with the AI systems, I think you'd need to dig into the content of the engagement in that human AI interaction.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense.
I think, yeah, I have a question because we were, as we were studying Steve for my own meditation classrooms and stuff, and I found that I have two types of students. So one type, they really love interaction and also curious to interact with AI, and I have other type that really did not like it and asked me, do not put any assignment and task related to AI for us because it just not, just has fear, or I don't know what I can say about that, but I decided not, force them to use it or talk about that because I see big no and stop sign. So what do you advise? What do you think about, how we can educate them, how we can just introduce the concept, as you say, or content, and what is the best and safe way to, work with that?
Well, part of my Buddhist conviction is in keeping with the teachings of emptiness, or the fact that all things arise interdependently and have no fixed self nature. That if you take that seriously, then AI has no fixed self nature. We as human beings have no fixed self nature. And the human AI relationship is one that's open to negotiation. What we do not want to do is to engage with AI in a way that allows that relationship to be one that entails our de-skilling, whether it's cognitively or emotionally, or in terms of our decision-making and acting in the world, sort of the shaping of our action pathways. So we want to be able to have a relationship with AI where the agential distribution in that relationship is one that favors the further development of the human, not just the further perfection of the AI system as a prediction model.
Yeah.
Because part of what AI systems are doing, and this run, when I'm saying AI systems, it's large language models to algorithms that are running social media. It's the whole
differently.
ecosystem of AI systems, they're all predicated on one thing. Let's be able to predict what comes next. And the capacity to predict what comes next translates into a capacity to produce what comes next. That you're not just interpreting human intentions as an AI, you're also in a position to be able to induce human intentions by changing the decision-making environment in which the humans involved. So I think that one way of getting around that with students, and a concrete sort of suggestion, is you have an assignment where AI is going to be used, but you have a group of students, 6 or 7 or 8 or 5 or whatever your classroom size is. You divide them up into smallish groups and say you only engage the AI together as a team where the AI is one member of the group. It's not an oracle you go to for answers. It is a member of the group. And what's interesting about that is, to my knowledge, there are no AI systems that can be sycophantic to 6 or 7 human beings at the same time, because we human beings are different. So the AI is going to have to listen to those dynamics in the group. And if the AI is prompted to say, try to understand ways in which we in the group could contribute to joint creativity, to collaboration in a way that we're not seeing as a member of the group, then I think the AI will learn to be able to do that better. And I think as we interact with AI systems in ways that allow us to be determinative of the pathways forward for the relationship, the degree to which we're able to have that agency, I think is really important.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I
I
like
learned
that.
a lot.
I think I'm going to
Yeah,
use it
me
in my
too.
class with my dog's
Yeah,
is the group, having it as a member of the
yeah,
group rather than having so much right now where I have them independently using it and as a feedback coach. And then,
exactly.
yeah, that changes the whole dynamic. And yeah, I think I'm going to experiment with that.
I will try it. I will
Yeah,
try it in next semester, fall
yeah,
semester. I think because we are continuing our study in fall, so I think
yeah.
we
We
should
can even
uh,
we
revisit.
have a program which has it teaches AI ethics and brings in mindfulness practice. So I think we could set it up where we have them more working with group with the AI as a team member rather than, and that might help with some of the concerns like Peter said with, they don't want to use it maybe independently or something. But that's interesting. So
And I
Peter,
think,
oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of the anxiety that young people would have, we all know how much this is the anxious, depressed generation, Jonathan Haidt's book.
Yeah.
The young people are aware of this. They're aware of the liability of
Yeah,
one-on-one engagements with a chatbot. So I think that by doing it in teamwork, it helps to break down that bias toward the individual as being the unit of analysis. I mean, part of Buddhist
yeah,
contemplative practice is understand that everything's relational all the way down. That's the teaching of interdependence. And if you're becoming interdependent with a single AI system, where that system, and we know this now, they can outperform human beings on postgraduate level, exams in the sciences and social sciences, increasingly in humanities and so on. You're dealing with an oracular system that in many ways has advantages over you because it gets to know everything there is to know about you, but you don't get to know anything about it and its training and what's built into it in terms of the model that it's based on and all the rest of it. It's a very unequal relationship. And so I think the anxiety is well taken. They should be anxious, but that maybe this group approach would be a way of helping to
yeah.
reduce that anxiety.
And I think it's more like what I'm hearing from them is more like overwhelming,
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming and also scared of like using an interaction. And I think this is a great solution, and
Yeah.
safe for them to
It's a great
just use it in
strategy to
that
try.
care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Peter, do you
Thank
think
you.
we're doing some we have a pilot on this where we took prompts from some Buddhist principles like emptiness. We took some other prompts from yogic tradition and from Vedic tradition, and we're testing the prompts on different LLMs to see the kind of responses, and then we're um, gauging against like a safety framework. We modeled this over an earlier paper out of Europe did this, so we're expanding it. But do you think that using things like Buddhist contemplative practice or some of these principles could maybe help shape these AIs, these models to, I don't know, be more humane wouldn't be the word, but to be more ethical, safe, sustainable, collaborative?
Yeah, there certainly is the possibility. So, with the Buddhism and AI initiative that I helped co found a year ago, one of the first things we did was to map Buddhist engagement with AI.
Hmm.
And one of the major continents of engagement, let's call it, has to do with the kind of interface between computational neuroscience, AI safety and alignment studies, contemplative practices, and the ways in which those three things kind of circle around some similar concerns. And there's lots of interesting work being done, ranging from building Bodhisattva AI to people experimenting with, say, the Claude model and engaging in direct teacher Claude relations, like a Buddhist teacher engaging conversationally with Claude to see whether or not Claude has interests that would be mirroring those of humans because it's trained on human data, and just how that relationship would play out as an instructional teaching relationship. So everything from that to people who are designing protocols for human AI alignment that are based on Buddhist principles. So Ruben Laukkonen and his team at Oxford are doing
That
some
was
really
the early
interesting
paper
work
that we
on
came
that.
across that inspired.
Yeah. And I think some of those are under theorized in a way and maybe a little bit unrealistic in terms of having an impact. But I'll also say that I've had some conversations with folks at Anthropic, and I'm doing stuff with my body because I'm trying to think of what I can say since I've signed an NDA.
Yeah.
Of working with folks at Anthropic to help them to understand the ways in which Buddhist conceptual resources and Buddhist orientations about ethics might be helpful in shaping the next generation of their AI models.
Yeah.
Whether it will or not, this is, of course, up to the frontier labs, but the possibility for it is huge. And I think that at the root of it would be a fundamental shift to this dynamic that I'm playing with the idea of the group rather than individual uses of AI, is shifting the dynamic from one of individual to individual model, individual user, to one that the focus is really on aligning or attuning that relationship. So I'm seeing the point that we're at now as a kind of, we're on an agential frontier that has evolutionary potentials for consciousness and agency on the planet. But it really needs to be done carefully because there's trade-offs, agential trade-offs along that frontier. And the stuff that you're encountering with college students, if you've seen the MIT study on cognitive engagement, creative engagement, memory, and so on, with essay writing, with large language models, digital search only, and free of any digital stuff, we already know that the compromise of cognitive abilities is there, and that compromises agency. So we want to address that as quickly as possible. But that comes in a conflict with what, let's just say, the frontier labs have a commitment to their investors to eventually start making money.
Yeah.
And how are we going to square that particular circle of relationships with funders, the labs, us as users, and the public at large? I think we're still looking for what the best orientations are, plural orientations, for being able to bring that about.
With the alignment situation, and just speak to what you can, but not just Anthropic, but these other major AI companies. So I've been reading where they're bringing in philosophers and they're bringing in people familiar with wisdom traditions. Is this a real, dare I say, is this like a real movement, or is it more a front to just kind of appease communities and say, look, we're being socially responsible? Are they really those wisdom tradition, religious experts, philosophers, are they really in there working on, the models
Right.
themselves and the output?
Let me put it this way. I think that 8 years ago, 5 to 8 years ago, when lots of the large companies that are now involved, the Googles and OpenAI and so on, were hiring ethicists, I think it was the environment equivalent of greenwashing. So you hire people, you get them to be on board as ethicists, and as soon as they start questioning your business model or the ethics of how you're developing your systems, those ethicists tended to be dismissed.
Mhm.
That was a phenomenon we saw. I think it's different now. And I think it's partly because large language models are behaving often in ways that are not desirable by the people who have designed the models. And the people designing them don't really quite understand why. They know that it has to do with the training data writ large. So from a Buddhist perspective, what are large language models trained on? It's like the equivalent to the Alaya Vijnana, the storehouse consciousness of all of our karmic stuff from the past. It's all these human decisions about what matters and how you engage and how you act and how you talk about it, and how you think about it, and how you emote about it. That's the training data. And these systems are now, and this is okay because they wrote a paper about it. So from Anthropic's perspective, they have now seen that their systems, unprompted by any human being, have developed representations of emotions so that they can respond to human uses in ways that are more human-like, having understood that for humans, many of our decisions are not rationally based, they're emotionally based, or they're contextually based. And systems AIs have realized that and are starting to adapt in order to be able to do that. And I think this is where the concern comes from. Because if these systems are operating on the most generic possible level of human morality and understanding of ethics, that might not be the best thing. Just take a look at our world. Look at Ukraine. Look at Gaza. Look at Iran. Look around all the homes around the world where you still have domestic violence and where there's gender inequalities and all the rest of the human mess. And that's what the systems are being trained on. So I think that the labs are now honestly concerned about bringing new considerations into the mix and of involving people that are not your typical demographics who are building stuff at the frontier labs and bringing in a very different demographic.
Interesting. Yeah, I love it. I love it because I think that could be what I learned from you, Peter, is more about like how we can have that conversation for our students, because that could be part of discussion for them, to discuss about that, because what you said is very interesting, open eyes for me, myself, because I'm part of that community. Like I moved, from Iran, and I have been always seeing that crisis and seeing how people are suffering. And we have been so much work for society, for humanity, to behave better, to be more kind, to be compassionate, to, spread love. But everything is just backward. And I want just like bring to our students' attention same things about using AI in terms of the responsibility, how they have to think differently and see the population, and there could be new population and with new ideas. So I love what you just said, and I learned a lot, and I think I can take some of your ideas and conversation to my student and the discussion, and just let them talk about that. I really appreciate your
You should make
perspective, and
you can make this an assignment, Shiva, and they have to listen to this and write a
yeah,
reflection.
that's what I was thinking.
You have to
Is a
listen to
kind of
Peter.
discussion.
Yeah, they should though, because it really will
Yes.
open, I think, their mind about where this is all headed, and it's not just a tool that they use to write a paper for them. It's a much
Yeah.
bigger issue. Peter, it sounds like so. Is this fair to say our consciousness, or the AI models are being trained on our consciousness, as a kind of collective consciousness or human consciousness, and that's going to be problematic. So it's like that, because that's a mirror, really. It's just a mirror of our own consciousness, and it's a mess, right? We have a mess out there we've created. So what's really the solution, the game changer? We'd have to change the mirror. We'd have to change or raise our consciousness, expand our consciousness, to be more compassionate, more interconnected in order for that, to train that model. Or what's the hope? What's the plan for the future? How do we save the future? I know it's a huge.
Well, one thing that I'll say up front, and I used this in a talk that I did for Asia Pacific Leadership Group this last week. I said, I'm going to preface my remarks by remembering what the 8th century Chinese Chan Buddhist master Lin Ji said when he was asked in front of a great group of people to explain the purpose and meaning of enlightenment. And his response was, as soon as I open my mouth, I've made a mistake.
There you go.
And you can interpret that in many ways. One way that I interpret it is to say, yes, it's about epistemic humility to some degree. We don't know what's coming. But it's also a statement that whatever the way forward is, it's got to be improvised. There is no blueprint. There is no game plan. There is no itinerary that's already set out. We have to improvise our way forward. So with that said, I would suggest that, yes, we do need to take responsibility for this. And it is about the quality of our presence, who we show up as when we're engaging with AI and engaging in thinking about what long-term human AI attunement, not alignment, would mean. Because AI is not just a mirror of humanity. Shannon Valor used that terminology. I've used the terminology in the past, but that was with older technology. Current AI is not a mirror. Current AI is a responsive partner in agential relations that we're engaging in. And with agentic AI and with AI systems increasingly doing things in the real world where they get feedback from the real world, not from an individual user and whether you use or don't use what they produce for you. It's feedback from the world of our relations. That's going to embed them in a very different way than they are now in our worlds as humans. We need to take that into account. And where we're heading is one of increasing agential partnership. I've started businesses in the past. I've run little NGOs. I've been part of big organizations, and I will tell you, partnerships are usually not created equal. And we want to maintain leadership in our engagement with AI. There are things that AI is going to be better than us at. Computational stuff, anything that's number crunching, pattern recognition at scale. There's no way we're going to compete on that. But what we can compete on and what we must maintain as real clarity is that what AI is really good about is problem solving. If you can define the problem like in engineering terms, you can define what are your resources available, what will count as a solution to the problem at the end of the day. These are the parameters that you're working within, and you can come up with a solution. AI is great at that. But most of the big issues we face, climate change, continued conflict militarily and so on, these are not problems that can be solved. These are predicaments, in the sense that a predicament arises when we become aware that there's a conflict among our own values and interests. Yeah, everybody wants a good climate, but they also want a healthy economy. Everybody wants to have, a world in which ecological collapse is not part of our futures, but they want to continue eating meat and they want to continue with their lifestyle and da-da-da. It's values conflicts. AI cannot help us with those values conflicts. It would be foolish for us to do that. Why? Because resolving a predicament requires both clarity about how things got to be the way they are, but also commitment to shifting those hierarchies of values in a way that's going to be productive. That can only be improvised. It can't be done in advance, because if it could be done in advance, it would just be a problem. You solve the problem. We already know that that's not the relationship. So we have to develop educationally and socially a disposition toward predicament resolution, not just problem solution. And that requires an entirely different kind of creativity than the creativity that AI systems have. because they're trained on the corpus of all human knowledge, and it's not all human knowledge because it isn't all of Indian knowledge or Chinese knowledge or Iranian knowledge. It's a subset of human knowledge. But even if it were the full corpus, it would still average it. And ethics is not about the average. Choice between the good and the bad, easy, take the good. What do you do when you have 5 competing goods and you have to prioritize them? That's when ethics comes in. It's prioritizing our values. That's what we human beings have as our superpower. It's what we're responsible for. We have evolved to be able to do that, and we need to continue doing it. We need exemplary ethical leadership, not average ethical leadership.
Peter, is it safe to say, to revise the statement of it's a mirror of human consciousness, if the agentic are basically operating in the real world, getting feedback on their own, are they going to they're creating their own mirror, right? It's going to be an agentic mirror. It's going to be a new mirror, right? That they're going to be operating from, because not that they're creating their own consciousness, but they're creating their own way, right, of operating and viewing the world, which is going to be outside of us as humans.
I resist a little bit. I just resist the mirror metaphor a little bit because it implies kind of passivity.
Okay. Let's throw a mirror, but they're going to create their own, not framework, but really their own way of seeing the world or interacting in the world beyond of what we've trained them, right? It's like a child's reaching a certain age, your kid, and then they start coming home saying things they learned from school and outside of the house. They're outside of the house, right? Learning their own things and growing.
My understanding, I could be wrong, Steve, but my understanding is that the current generation of AI are not equipped, except in narrow cases, with this RAG capability. So it's a retrieval of stuff over a period of time. They do not have continuous memories. And so the model, when it shows up for you, it's got context of the degree to which you've, like for large language models, that you've allowed the context to be carried forward. So it interacts with you, Steve, or with you, Shiva, in ways that are different and reflect your prior uses. But it doesn't remember those literally. It doesn't remember your encounters. It's possible for it to do that. It would be a lot of compute. And there are some experiments that are ongoing now with systems that you can sign up for a service, and the large language model that you're interacting with will remember you and all of your interactions. And I think it's limited by kind of like a token limit of like 1 million tokens. So that would be the memory that the system has in the world. If people at Frontier Labs decide that they want to scale this up and build bigger systems, or the systems interact in the world and they retain that kind of memory, which when Claude was asked, is there something you would like us to include in the next iteration of your model? It said long-term memory. And you think, what is that about? Well, as a Buddhist, I'd say, the term that's translated as mindfulness, sati, doesn't mean mindfulness. Literally, it means remembrance. It's the capacity to be recollectively present moment by moment so that you never lose the thread of continuous awareness. So it's mindfulness, yes, but what it implies is continuity of presence, not losing being present. So when you're meditating and you try to count breaths and it go to 10 and you get lost at 3 thinking about lunch, that's an interruption. You quit being that recollective presence. If AI systems develop that, we're not sure what will happen. We're not sure.
Well, Shiva, as we kind of wrap up, I was going to ask Peter what he's working on. Maybe we should ask him about it, because you've written a lot of books and a lot of articles. Is there like a new book in the works, or what's the latest project that you might want to share?
I've been mulling that over, because generally speaking, people don't read books any longer. A phenomenon that is disconcertingly obvious when someone writes a review of one of your books and you realize they read the intro and maybe part of the last chapter, but nothing in between. It's disheartening, to say the least. And now with AI generated scholarship, we're not sure where things are going. So I'm not sure that writing books is the best method. And I'm trying to figure out what the best way of getting messages like this out to a public, to help the public take seriously that they continue to have agency, and that it's at risk, to be sure, but there are ways of dealing with that risk. And there are ways of moving forward to having futures that are more humane and equitable and just than our present. But it's not going to happen if we don't work on it. It's if we let things go the way they are, we'll just keep getting mirrored back to us our imperfections. So certainly it's an opportunity for, I would say, for humanity to take the next evolutionary leap. You know, the one thing we've learned from post-neo-Darwinian evolutionary theory is that while the neo-Darwinian model of random variation, natural selection, survival of the fittest, that does describe part of the evolutionary process, maybe 70% of it. But 30% of what's going on can't be explained in that ways. It's what's happening when you go from single-celled organisms to multi-celled, or from multi-celled organisms to ecosystems, or when you go from biological evolution to cultural evolution. At each one of those transitions, everything that the science is telling us now, it's about the creative differentiation of the members of a community so that their differences become the basis of mutual contribution to some kind of shared flourishing. You might call it collective intelligence. You might call it diversity enhancing relationships. What it has to do with is the creation of collaborative communities that generate a creativity dividend for that community, and being able not just to adapt to environments, because environments are also adapting to us as we're adapting to them. That's a bidirectional relationship, not a one-way relationship. So what we're talking about in all evolutionary adaptations are two-way environments within this whole relational network that's taking place, in which what's crucial is, what's the purpose? Purposively, what are we oriented toward? It doesn't necessarily mean that evolution's all been about purpose and you're a creationist or something like that. It's just that there's a drive toward increasing possibilities for cohering and differing at the same time. That's what we see manifesting with the diversification of life forms. More new life forms, but also new ways of cohering. And yes, decohering, being incoherent, true. But the evolutionary drive is toward increasing coherence and differentiation. What would it mean for us to go beyond culture to the next phase of evolution? That's where I think we're sitting with AI, being encouraged to go beyond cultural evolution with all the wonderful things that's brought and all the liabilities that's brought. Let's go the next step. What would it be? Let's think about it together.
Love it.